I have to make an apology, and that is Star Wars Battlefront II is actually not as bad as I initially thought. Before that Let's Play video that I made a couple months ago, I made research on the game, and they were mostly negative reviews at the time. Not to mention that when I was filming that video, I found that the story didn't impress me, to say the least. But that pretty much changed as I played other modes apart from the story mode. But because a lot of the important stuff was locked behind the PlayStation Plus subscription service, I decided to review only the single player content, which, does sound strange, but I do want to make more of an in-depth video for every mode, not just single player stuff in a future video. But anyway, let's get on with the review. I would like to start off with the story of Battlefront II, because I feel like there is a bit to talk about, and I think that it is decent at best. I didn't like the beginning of the story, as when the Death Star was destroyed, I thought there would be like a lot of emotion, or at least shock, because, it's the second Death Star to be destroyed. But no, apparently the current mission matters more than what they literally just saw. And on top of all of this, these Imperials turn on the Empire, not from the negligence of, 2 Death Stars being destroyed, or, the poor recovery from the rebellion, but because their home planet was being purged, and, apparently that was the line that crossed for 2 out of 3 of the Imperials. I mean, it's kind of selfish, because the Empire destroyed Alderaan, a time ago, and yet they were still with the Empire. I mean, there are multiple points that I think you and I can name during the Empire that would have made sense that they would rebel, but no, it's just the fact that the home world was being purged. That sounds dumb. Aside from these criticisms, I always thought of it as a forgettable story, both for a game and for a Star Wars product, but honestly the story would be the weakest link, and I do appreciate that there were some character development, but it all just feels very Disney-like, if you know what I mean. It's not a bad story for a game, it's just underwhelming, and it's not like it didn't meet my low expectations, but it could be better. At least it has some good moments like the Luke Skywalker cameo, or mission, but to be honest, it's the actual gameplay that's really good. There are 3 modes that you can choose for single player, which are Campaign, Instant Action, and Arcade. The Campaign section obviously includes the story and the Resurrection DLC, which, as I said before, are forgettable. However, the Instant Action, they have 3 sub-modes, as I like to call them, which are the Supremacy, Attack, and Defense, with Attack and Defense being as simple as attack or defend your current objective. And Supremacy is a mix of attacking an enemy's claimed checkpoint and defending your team's checkpoint. It's a great way for practicing your skills in the game or just having more chill matches. And Arcade is a bit different, as you can play solo, co-op, and versus. And solo and co-op have pretty much the same sub-modes, and the difference is that, co-op needs a second controller to play with another mate. However, these sub-modes have battle scenarios, which are pretty much challenge maps to complete, and they get progressively harder by upping the difficulty and limiting your resources like HP or the time that you have, while the enemies are harder to kill. It's a great way to find some way to have a challenge for single player or co-op, and it's also, spoiler alert, for free. Also for solo and co-op is a custom arcade, which is kind of where you make your own kind of match for your liking. And there are a few stages of this. First, you can pick a light or dark side. Then there are teams, which is you with a bunch of bots at a difficulty of your choosing. And then Onslaught, which is just you against everyone. And you can go traditional Battlefront style, FPS slash third person shooter kind of thing, or you can do Starfighters, and they are both great. I personally prefer the normal Battlefront 2 kind of style of gameplay, but I do like Starfighter. It's just, I suspect that Squadrons probably perfected all of this Starfighter mechanics, but overall the custom arcade is pretty good for either practice for multiplayer or playing Battlefront modes on your preference on skill. Versus is essentially a mode where you can play only on heroes, and it does have a normal team battle and starfighter modes, as I had just talked about. And they have like similar modes, but there's also dual mode, and it's just playing as any other character with a lightsaber, I remember, which is what I think can get pretty interesting, because versus mode is co-op only, so it would be a matter of how skilled your mate is in this game. To sum it all up, most of these single player modes are pretty decent modes and that you can play, and there is a surprising amount of modes that you can play with other people, so long as you have a second controller, which I do like, since I do have a second controller. The core gameplay mechanics are straightforward, as there are the classic FPS functions of holding your left trigger and your right trigger to shoot, with a few special abilities to use to help you win the match, which can very quickly become second nature when playing the game long enough. But that's not really new, since a lot of hero shooters do the same principle. Strangely enough is that the lightsaber mechanics have the same button functions as normal blasters, which feel weird to me, and it resulted into their strikes being swift but also stiff every time you hit an enemy, which doesn't feel as good as the Jedi games, which are more smooth and freeing in comparison. You could say the Jedi games focus more on the lightsabers more than Battlefront 2. What I'm saying is that the lightsaber combat can be better. How you can control the starfighters does feel like you're flying a drone, with the button functions being similar to the FPS functions as I mentioned before, which I think it's understandable, as it's a little bit hard, like giving it unique button functions to like learn new mechanics and all that, but at the same time it would be nice to have said different mechanics to make it feel, something interesting, something more. On the plus side though, at least they have different abilities, which I would hope for, since they are starfighters. Overall, I like the gameplay mechanics as well as the single player, and they are more fun, but I find the story to be the game's weakest link, and is the one I often avoid. It reminds me of Call of Duty at this point, where Call of Duty's campaign missions, they've taken less of the spotlight with every new game they release, and the multiplayer would be having the most spotlight. And I think the principle is same with Battlefront 2. I would like actual multiplayer sections for free, and not just on top of a subscription to play online. But I don't know, it's how it is. But if I ever get that subscription, or just have a PC, then a proper review for this game would be necessary. But yeah, that's what I think of the game. It's pretty decent for an FPS Star Wars game to play with your mates, and I will see you in the next video.